Never before since the end of World War II has the international order been under greater pressure than it is today. Bloomberg reports, the post-Cold War American peace has come to an end. The sudden Hamas attack on Israel, in itself a great tragedy, the death toll in Israel relative to the total population is several times higher than in the US after 9/11. But the situation threatens to worsen if Tehran's Lebanese puppet Hezbollah enters the fray. With the opening of a second front against Israel, the conflict will reach the regional level. However, the war in the Levant is only one symptom of a worsening global security crisis. Consider the Eurasian panorama. Europe is experiencing its worst period of instability in decades due to President Vladimir Putin's barbaric special operation in Ukraine. The threat of war is growing in the Balkans, where the recent Serbian troop surge has forced NATO to concentrate additional forces in Kosovo. In the Caucasus, Azerbaijan has taken advantage of Russia's distraction and seized control of Nagorno-Karabakh, causing some 100,000 residents to flee to Armenia. Along this arc of instability stretching from Eastern Europe to Southwest Asia, territory seizures and ethnic cleansing are relevant again. The Western Pacific is less violent, but no less dangerous. The Taiwan Strait is a perennial hotspot as China tries to force the island into submission and forces the US and its regional allies to prepare for a decisive confrontation. Tensions are also rising in the South China Sea as the Philippines, tired of years of intimidation by Beijing, increasingly asserts its rights. On the Korean Peninsula, Pyongyang is steadily improving its nuclear weapons and missile programs and fueling Putin's war effort by providing artillery ammunition and other resources. This is speculation, not reliable sources. And then there is the Middle East. Just a few weeks ago, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that the region is calmer today than it has been in the last 2 decades. He has probably regretted that statement by now and would like to take it back. Iran is moving closer to a nuclear capability in pursuit of regional hegemony. It maintains a vast network of proxies that includes Hamas and Hezbollah, which have proven they are well positioned to plunge the region into chaos. Just last week, the US shot down a Turkish drone over Syria, an illustration of how tense the situation remains. In that country too, the Middle East is once again ablaze, and all 3 key regions of Eurasia are in a period of turmoil. In Africa, the Sahel region is gripped by an epidemic of coups. Sudan is plunged into civil war, and jihadist violence is spreading across the continent. In Latin America, democracy is faltering and criminal gangs are terrorizing defenseless populations. Finally, the world has been touched by climate change and its deleterious effects. With countries on many continents flooded with refugees, it is hard to find a single major region that has been spared the current turmoil. And this is underlined by 4 distinctive features of the world today. First, the Pax Americana American world, the period of relative economic and socio-political stability that developed in Western countries after World War II, and the final separation of the spheres of influence between the US and the USSR. By analogy with the Pax Romana, the rule of the Roman Empire of the post-Cold War period has come to an end. The post-1991 generation experienced a level of geopolitical and ideological competition unprecedentedly low by historical standards, mainly because Washington and its allies had gained such a decisive advantage. However, the situation is changing as revisionist states, most notably China, Russia and Iran, attempt to push back against American power and create their own spheres of influence. The resurgence of great power despotism, in turn, is adding to the pressure on global democracy. We are back to business as usual in world politics, and this is an unseemly and violent affair. Second, the ties between revisionist powers are stronger than at any time in recent decades. It is probably rash to suggest that Russia was involved in this weekend's events. After all, it has good relations with Israel. What is true, however, is that the conflict in Ukraine has solidified Moscow's deep, mutually reinforcing military partnership with its authoritarian brethren in Iran, North Korea and China. The solidarity of these rivals only exacerbates the collective threat. Third, different types of crises, geopolitical and transnational, traditional and non-traditional, are increasingly merging. It is now fashionable to talk about great power rivalry again, and terrorism and other post-Cold War problems seem to have disappeared. But as we are now seeing, terrorist groups remain deadly, in part because geopolitical players like Iran use them as tools to pressure their enemies. Meanwhile, conflict in Ukraine or internal unrest in regions from South America to North Africa fuels migratory flows that overwhelm countries around the world. Fourth, we are witnessing in real time how fragile progress is. The harassment, kidnapping and execution of Israeli civilians have demonstrated how the most basic morality rapidly disappears when peace and security are violated. The fundamental pillar of the world order, the inadmissibility of changing borders by force, is being tested every day in Ukraine. Fortunately, the news is far from hopeless. Increased threats to the international system have already increased cooperation among its intercessors. Anti-China coalitions are multiplying in the Indo-Pacific. NATO is expanding and strengthening in response to the conflict in Ukraine. Iran's enemies are also converging. Hamas may have tried to derail the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia with its attack. The international order is now under pressures unseen since the end of the Second World War. The work to prevent its collapse will be multilateral, and it is only just beginning. Hal Brands is Distinguished Professor at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, a member of the State Department's Foreign Policy Council, Senior Advisor at Macro Advisory Partners, and co-author of Danger Zone: The Coming Conflict with China.